So today we're going to be talking about campus climate and if it's getting hot in here, but please keep your clothes on. So when I talk about campus climate, what is it that I'm talking about? I'm talking about the social climate on campus. Today, in particular, we're going to be talking about social climate for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, etc. individuals. And when I present a climate question to people, how we present it is we ask them on a scale from 0 to 100, with 0 being cold, not accepting at all, 100 being really warm, really super accepting. So work done in our lab, the Social Issues and Relations Lab in 2010-2011 found that ETSU students on average rate the campus climate for lesbian, gay, and bisexual individuals at about a 65. So the way that we talk about this is, it's not super cold, but you probably want a light jacket or a sweater. But as you know, this work was done in 2010-2011, and given the social climate that's rapidly changing that we live in now, and the exclusion of other identities in this work, we want to address campus climate now. So what we need to do is assess climate on campus as it stands now, looking at a host of different identities. And this has a lot of implications for resources and funding on campus, which Sherry's going to get into a little bit later. So what are we to do? Thus, Campus Pride is born. So Pride is our new campus climate study, and Pride stands for Perceptions Regarding Identity and Diversity in the Environment. This project was born out of a research project that I did for a translational psychology class. The whole purpose of translational psychology is to use the basic research that we do to make a difference in our environment. So taking that research that we're already doing and making a change in our world. So based on this project I did for this class, we then took that a step further and actually made it something we're really going to do. So we met with different experts across the university. We met with individuals in women's studies. We met with people who study religiosity, and we met with the Office of Equity and Diversity and asked them, what do you want to know? What do you think needs to be included in this work, and what kinds of questions do you think will have an impact on the university level? So what we're assessing is, first, we're assessing perceived climate for sexual, gender, racial, and religious minorities. And how this works is I basically present that question that you saw at the beginning, the 0 to 100, please rate how warm and accepting you think the social climate is, for a host of different minority groups. And this question is asked to everyone regardless of identity. So this is including people who fall into majority categories for all of these different identities. We're also asking about specific experiences of stigma and violence on campus. So asking individuals who fall into these minority groups, have you experienced stigma on campus? Have you experienced violence on campus? And this includes stigma experiences that are just overhearing people say negative things about you or about your identity. Because, for example, if you're sitting in a class, your teacher says something really negative about gay people, that's not directed at you. They might not know that you're gay, but that's going to have an impact on your experience on campus. We're also assessing a host of different outcome factors. Obviously, as psychologists, one of the things that we're interested in is mental health. But in thinking about how we can make this impactful for the university at the university level, the university is a business, so they need to know, bottom line, how does this impact our business? So we're also looking at retention and academic performance. So are these individuals who are experiencing these negative things, who think that social climate's really bad, are they going to stick around and keep giving ETSU their money? And lastly, we're assessing a host of predictors or protective factors. For example, we're asking individuals, how much contact do you have with people of these different minority groups? This includes interpersonal contact, such as, oh, I had a conversation with someone who I knew was gay, but also contact in the classroom. So are you talking about diversity issues in your classroom? Are sexual orientation, gender identity, religious diversity, racial diversity, are these topics that are being discussed in your classroom? We're also talking about outness. So how out are students on campus about their sexual orientation, their gender identity, their religion? Because that has big impacts for how we think our campus is made up. If we have a bunch of people on campus who identify in these ways, but we don't know because they're not out, that has a big implication for how warm our environment is. And lastly, social support. Sherry's going to talk a little bit more in depth about why social support is so important, but the reason that we are assessing these factors is because these are things that we can change. We can increase social support on campus by offering support groups, by offering events. We can increase contact by making it a requirement that classes talk about diversity issues, even in a class that's not at face value about diversity. So this study is different from previous studies we've done on campus, in part because it focuses specifically on climate. A lot of other research that's being done on campus or being done by people on campus doesn't specifically look at campus climate and the social environment of our campus, where this study is specifically trying to do that. Next, it includes more than one stigmatized identity. So we're not just looking at sexual orientation, we're not just looking at gender, we're also looking at race and religion. It really allows us to see a whole breadth of issues. Next, we're also including faculty and staff. Previous work that looks at campus climate often just focuses on students, but we want to know what are the experiences of faculty and staff on campus, in part because it obviously has an implication for their own lives. It impacts their well-being and their happiness, dependent upon how warm and inviting the climate is, but it also has an impact on the students. If faculty and staff don't feel welcome or accepted, that's going to translate into the way that they interact with students, and that can have a really negative impact. And lastly, it's really campus specific. These questions are specifically asking, what are your experiences on ETSU campus? And it's really important that we know what our campus is like, because we need to know how our students are doing. We know from previous research in our lab that looks at the overall climate of Johnson City, it's way less accepting than on campus. So by looking specifically at campus, we're saying, okay, this can be a beacon for our community. So let's increase campus climate and then hope that that spreads out to the rest of Johnson City. So we are about to start the data collection for this study. We're going to be sending out the survey through a bunch of different listservs on campus. And as a perk to try to get people to participate, we're going to be kind of entering people into a raffle or a drawing. Sorry, we're not supposed to say raffle. Into a drawing for 2 different iPad minis. But I want to really emphasize how important it is that you tell everyone you know about this research and get as many people as you can to participate. So emailing it out to different listservs you're a part of it, telling it to all of your different classes. Basically, anyone you know on campus, please share this with them, because it has a lot of implications for our university, which I'm going to let Sherry get into now.
All right, so I'm going to, I went the right way. I'm going to back up a little bit and talk about why this is important. And I'm going to talk more specifically about gender and sexual minority students, but this can also concern faculty and staff as well. So we know through decades of research on this topic that being in a negative environment towards sexual minority individuals has a lot of negative consequences. That includes a decrease in social support, because unfortunately, oftentimes those providing the social support, family and friends, also have the negative attitudes towards sexual minorities. And also the atmosphere may not be appropriate for someone to come out, and that limits the ways that they can seek out social support. So we do see a decrease in social support with more negative climates. Anxiety and depression are common negative consequences for sexual minorities in these chilly atmospheres or chilly climates, and even suicidal ideation. So research does tell us that when sexual minorities are exposed to such negative attitudes on a consistent basis, then suicidal ideation goes up. And this atmosphere or climate also creates a place where victimization is more prevalent. So on campuses that don't have protection, or in areas that don't have protection for sexual minorities, you see victimization go up. And this can be verbal or physical. A recent study done on a national sample showed that sexual minorities who live in areas that have high rates of discriminatory attitudes actually die on average 12 years sooner than sexual minorities who live in areas with lower rates of discriminatory attitudes. And all of this is really powerful information, because it's just telling in itself, and there is just a plethora of data to back this up. But we also want to talk about the implications that are more specific to the university setting. And the first is Title IX regulations. So while Title IX is worded to address discrimination that's based on sex, we know that this can also overlap with LGBT issues. And we want to make sure that we're not creating a climate where this is likely to happen. Additionally, there is the Student Non-Discrimination Act that's in the works, and this does include language that is specific for LGBT students, for sexual and gender orientation, discrimination based on sexual and gender orientation. As far as the students go, academic performance levels are decreased in negative climates, and they tend to be isolated from the campus community and events going on campus. And another recent study did show that academic and social integration suffers. And so this concerns, the academic integration concerns GPA and engagement in the community. And then the social integration involves campus satisfaction or institutional satisfaction. So these are really important concerns that we need to address for students. But one of the most important things is that the students believe that these negative climates are actually impacting their overall academic success. So not only is it happening and we see it in the research, but these students feel like it's happening too. They see it too. So specific to ETSU, pulling from the data that Emma mentioned earlier that we have, and this is sampled from the ETSU student population, sexual minority students tended to feel more ashamed, self-conscious, and embarrassed due to their sexual orientation, and they also felt like others looked down on them due to their sexual orientation, more so than their heterosexual peers. And this type of integration or internalization of the chilly climate is exactly why we need to focus on this. So not only for the well-being of the students, but also to ensure that sexual minority students are able to reach their full academic potential at ETSU. So what I tend to look at in my research is the more positive side to all of this. So what does the research show helps sexual minorities navigate these stigmatizing situations and environments? We know that, well, the first three kind of go together. So cognitive flexibility is the ability to see multiple options for a solution to a situation, and higher problem-solving skills along with a sense of mastery or control over the situation. These all work to help bring about more positive outcomes in the face of stigma. There's also self-compassion, which is feeling kind to yourself, and a non-judgmental attitude, and recognizing that other people also experience these things and you're not alone. That type of attitude and hope also work to promote more positive outcomes for sexual minorities in stigmatizing environments, as well as emotional openness, so acknowledging and accepting negative internal reactions that you have to these events. So if something's happening, you're going to have, something negative happens to you, you automatically have a negative reaction internally, and just to accept that and know that it's okay. And then meaning making. Right now, I'm only aware of some qualitative data on meaning making, but this is sexual minorities taking this negative experience and gaining something positive from it. So understanding that they now have a unique perspective on life and the world, or taking that and being active for social change so that maybe things aren't so bad for the next generation. Things like that. That has also been linked to better outcomes. And those things are all great. And if we're in a position to influence those things for somebody, that's really good, and maybe we can do that. But most of us aren't that influential in other people's lives, right? So what are the things that other people can do? So this is the other level. Well, the first is a no-brainer, and that's social support. So be there, listen, provide resources if you have them, and help find them if you don't already have them. Community connectedness. And this is being connected with like others, so sexual and gender minority individuals being connected with like others and being able to share those resources and seeing how other people deal with some of the same situations, and know that you're not alone in the whole process of getting through a chilly climate. And then there are structural factors. So in the research, this mostly deals with non-discrimination laws and marriage equality, but we might also see this translate to the university setting in terms of that Student Non-Discrimination Act that I talked about, or having gender-neutral bathrooms, or even having programs on campus like women's studies that serve to educate and advocate for the sexual and gender minorities on campus. All right, so we can do all of those things on our campus that I just talked about, but sometimes prejudice attitudes are barriers to fully meeting those needs. And the research addressed prejudice attitudes in 3 ways. So they talk about education, contact, and protest. So education is providing accurate information that confronts these negative stereotypes about sexual and gender minorities that people already hold. This is shown to be somewhat effective and is probably the most practical of the 3 that I'm going to talk about. We can do this through programs on campus, hanging flyers. Education can come in many forms. So this is probably the most practical. And from the data that we have mentioned several times already, ETSU students were not very knowledgeable about LGBT issues. So that really shows a need for this type of action on campus. The next one is contact. So positive social interaction with someone of the stigmatized group. This has shown to be even more effective than education, but it's not really convenient, or it's not always available. So this might be where Heroes comes in, or things where, or instances where people do have positive social interaction on campus. And for some people, being out, that creates positive social interaction, but being out isn't always appropriate for everybody. So this is not to encourage, but to say that that can also influence. And then protest. So this is the suppression of those negative stereotypes. And it usually doesn't work, and oftentimes it actually increases the prejudice of the other person. So when you're telling someone that know they're wrong, but then not educating them on that. When education doesn't accompany this, it can actually lead to more prejudiced attitudes. You can think about if somebody gets on your bumper when you're going down the highway, and what do you tend to do? You tend to maybe slow down a little bit and until they back off. So that might be a good analogy for this one. And so now I want to talk about what is already being done on campus. HEROES is the student group. It is helping to educate regarding orientation, equality, and the spectrum. And they meet on Monday nights at 7 p.m. October is LGBTQ History Month, and they actually have 2 months worth of planning. During their meeting time, they have a series on Let's Erase Erasure that discusses issues within the LGBT community that you may not be aware of. Safe Zone is an educational program on campus and has trained over 87 faculty and staff on LGBT issues and how to be a good ally. They've also done this training for diversity educators, the HEROES group, medical students, and I feel like I'm leaving some, the Behavioral Health and Wellness Center. So there is education going on at ETSU, and they have a website, it will be up and running soon. I don't know if it is already, but it does list the people who have went through the training and have agreed to be allies, so that if students have concerns and they are looking for somewhere to go for these, that it's going to be sensitive to these concerns, then they can look on the Safe Zone website and find a faculty or staff member to go to. And then we have the Masters of Arts and Liberal Studies, which does have a concentration in gender and diversity studies. And then, like I was saying, programs like Women's Studies need their own slide because there's just so much going on that supports the LGBT community at ETSU. And that is having an LGBT and feminist presence at orientations. There's a crisis referral program. Educational boards are posted throughout campus to get correct information out to anybody who's willing to stop and look at it. They support and co-sponsor many of the FMLA and HEROES events that go on campus. This lecture series here, Women on Wednesdays, the Women's Studies program hosts that for us. Sexual protection, so there's LGBT inclusive sexual protection in the Women's Studies department, so you can get dental dams if you don't know where to get those. And they also have many courses that focus on or are inclusive of the LGBT issues. There are also courses in other departments that are LGBT inclusive. Like Emma was saying, we could probably work to get more of those. There are a ton of faculty and staff here at ETSU that are just super sensitive to these topics and will go out of their way for students to provide them with an atmosphere that's accepting and get them the resources that they need. We do have gender-neutral bathrooms. ETSU's policy is that you can use whatever bathroom that you feel comfortable with, and there are also gender-neutral restrooms. So I feel like that's pretty progressive. And then Office of Equity and Diversity does list several resources for LGBT students on their webpage. What's coming up? So we're going to keep doing those things, and there are a few more projects that will be in reality soon. And one is the transgender support group that the Counseling Center is starting. A multicultural center will have student committee meetings once a month that will have HEROES and FMLA student representatives. to make sure that the university is meeting the needs of the students. And then Queer in Appalachia, Dr. Hillary Malatino is putting together a speaker series that will start next spring, or this coming spring, to highlight the work of LGBTQIA authors and presenters, academia, that are actually from the Appalachia South. So that will be, I'm really excited about that. That will start at the beginning of next semester. So there's one more thing that is potentially going on at ETSU. There are talks of a living and learning community for women's studies. There is no commitment to this partnership with the Department of Housing and Residence Life. But there is talks, and there are certain concerns that need to be addressed before a partnership can develop. But what this will do is provide women's studies students and other students that share academic interests safe housing options that will be grouped together to create this living and learning environment. So what that will do is create another actual space on campus where students know that they can find allies, because students know that women's studies is one of the groups on campus that advocates for them and the LGBT issues. So they know that they'll be able to find allies there, and also this will provide sexual minorities that share academic interests with women's studies a safe housing option. But like I said, that is still in discussions, and there are concerns that need to be addressed before we can do that. So what we want to do is take ETSU from the ice ages to a more friendly climate. And so that is all we have for you today, and we can open this up to discussion or questions for Emma and I. Yes?
So one thing I often wonder is when you have a marginalized community on campus, if sometimes because they might be marginalized outside the insular support that they create around them, maybe potentially makes them seem like campus climate is a little bit better, even though maybe that might not be the case, just because they might be heavily involved in Heroes and other things that provide them that safe space. Have you encountered kind of any of that in your work, or would you just say that I'm just kind of talking, like, what is your experience with that?
I guess what I would argue is that them being involved in Heroes creates a warmer environment on campus, and like just the existence of that organization. So it might be kind of rose-tinted glasses a little bit, but I think if you're protected from any negative experience and you're not experiencing those negative things, even if it is because of your involvement in that group, it speaks volumes to why that group is important.
Right.
So one of the things we are asking is what groups in campus they're involved in, and so we'll be able to look at that with our new data to see are minorities who are participating in groups that are related to their identity more protected than those who aren't.
Right. Well, I was just really curious because 65 to me seems really great. That seems really high to me. So I was just wondering if that is something that you all are kind of considering, and it sounds like you are, so that's awesome.
And yes.
Oh, no.
I was just going to say we do have some preliminary data from a more recent round of this that we included trans climate as well, and that's much lower.
Okay.
So.
It's frigid. So one of the things I just wanted to sort of maybe suggest that could be interesting in terms of, so when you mentioned protest being the least effective sort of mode of changing hearts and minds, climate. I think, obviously there's some truth to that, but what I thought could maybe be explored a little bit is how protest can actually be a really effective way of increasing sort of positive self-regard amongst minority populations. So even though you may encounter pushback as a result of protest action, there's something about engaging in the act of protest that gives us sort of conduit for rage that can make people feel a lot better, right, internally, even as it might create a little bit more intense dissensus in a broader population.
Yeah, I think that is very possible. I don't think that has ever been looked at in the literature as far as I know. But I mean, I can see that. The literature that I was pulling from was solely looking at changing attitudes.
But that's a lot
and it could go along with the meaning making, actually. So, being able to stand up and protest against that might actually fall.
And also the sense of community that evolves out of those protest actions is really.
Yeah, a lot of the meaning-making research looks particularly at how experiencing stigma leads to activism. So that's like the number one kind of experience that people report as a meaning-making mechanism.
Yeah.
There's a difference between demonstrating, making yourself known, accepting your presence and sharing that with others and creating a truly adversarial relationship. We've pretty much had demonstrations more on this campus than we've had protests. And I think that has warmed the climate considerably in the years I've been here. That people have the positive attitude, we're here, we're enjoying ourselves, we want to share our joy with you, and ask us questions, and we'll share our information rather than that kind of adversarial thing. We're here, we know you don't like us, but you're going to have to accept us anyway.
Yeah.
I think that demonstration versus protest is an important distinction.
I think your comments are really great, and agree about the idea of positive marginality that I've seen talked about as being really helpful for meaning making. But I wanted to emphasize too what you said about contact, and that being the most sort of influential way of changing hearts and minds, and that combined with education. I look around the room and we're kind of a select group that are attending these things. And so I wonder, do you have any thoughts on ways to maybe institutionalize education and contact with these topics and specific people that might reach a broader audience?
I think one way, like I've noticed with the psychology department speaker series, I think that gets students to go to talks they wouldn't normally go to because it requires them to go to so many talks a semester. So they get emails about all of the different talks that are going on campus. So I think something similar set up in various departments. I also think that, for example, having professors offer extra credit or class credit for going to certain talks. For example, since I'm teaching social psychology this semester, I'm giving extra credit for going to any of the talks that are given throughout LGBT History Month because it is related to prejudice, which is a topic that we cover in the class. So just coming up with any way to relate the talks that are going on to the things that are being taught in the classroom. And I think that can happen across a lot of different subjects, even though we kind of focus specifically on more social psychology, women's studies classes, but I think that diversity issues are things that can be brought up in any classroom. And encouraging students to go to talks like this can occur in the context of a lot more courses than we consider.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about courses throughout the institution being incorporating diversity, because you can incorporate diversity into almost any subject, regardless of the content. But that, as far as education, I mean, what Emma said, and that would be the only, just keep on doing and do more.
About the Multicultural Center and how there's a real potential to reach the masses.
Yes, and that will be a focus, to make sure that every student, faculty, and staff member has an opportunity to participate in something that will increase their cultural competence and awareness. But my the point I was going to make is that there's been a lot of discussion about including a comment on faculty SAIs to ask students whether or not their faculty members are raising the question of diversity and inclusion in the content of their course curriculum. So I don't know how much progress, well, I know that recommendation has made it as far as the diversity strategic plan that's part of this current planning process. But whether or not it makes it into final implementation, it's too early to tell. But that's coming out of the Office of Academic Diversity.
Will that have to be voted on by students?
It may have to be voted on by faculty and senate. I'm not sure exactly where the final decision will be made regarding it.
Yeah, faculty senate finalizes those.
It's on the floor.
I think that one of the issues with a lot of these initiatives is that they are really easy for folks to opt out of.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
they prefer to. So in the absence of any kind of higher level administrative mandate about diversity across the curriculum, all we have are these sort of piecemeal measures that everybody who is already invested, right, will opt into and say, yes, this is great, but there's no sort of mandate that everybody has to. And I think that's a real issue. Not that I'm the biggest fan of administrative mandates generally, but I think on these issues that it's actually really imperative that they're not voluntary initiatives.
And I think that's part of what we're hoping to accomplish with the research we're doing. Because if we can point and say, okay, individuals feel that there's a bad climate, and also that means that they're going to drop out of school or they're doing really poorly, those are specific things that the university cares about. They want people to stay in school. Like, we have a pretty big retention issue at ETSU. So if we can point to that as a way that we can increase retention and actually increase enrollment, because we also ask about how likely are you to recommend ETSU to people you know. Because a lot of times, I think, especially for LGBT individuals who are going into college, they kind of feel it out. They ask people, how's the climate? Is it a safe place for me to go? So if we increase those measures and make it a mandate, that's going to increase our retention and probably our enrollment. So that's what we really want to accomplish with what we're doing.
I have a question. I've done research on minorities in the LGBT community, and one of the commonalities I found in the research I've done is that even though they identify with the LGBT community, they still feel marginalized. Is that a problem across this campus? Did you do any research or find anything regarding that topic?
We haven't so far, but it is included in what we're doing now. So that is something that I think is a really big issue, and Heroes in general thinks is a big issue. We're trying really to push for increasing diversity across the board, not just with LGBT students, but also within LGBT students. Like, we know, for example, our organization is really, really white, and that's a really big problem because we're not getting other people's experiences. So we're actually going to be talking about, coming up in the upcoming month, talking about different issues related to diversity within the community. So talking about racial diversity within the community, socioeconomic status within the community, and all of those things. That's something we're really trying to push for. So it is a problem, and we do recognize it, and we are trying.
I think that reflects the larger LGBT community as well.
Yeah, it is, and that's what, I mean, even in Atlanta, there is a stigma called the Delaware brother, where homosexual men are playing as if they're heterosexual because of the stigma on them. And so the HIV and AIDS rate is going higher up in heterosexual women, and they're not knowing that their partner actually identifies as a homosexual or even as bisexual. So just like, I mean, there's a lot of stigma wherever you go, period. But I mean, you think about, like, Atlanta is dealing with that, and that is considered a pretty friendly climate. So I can only imagine what it's like here at ETSU or even Jackson City within this region, what that looks like. So I just didn't know if that was even being addressed or even considered.
Yeah.
I just taught a whole class on that. So if you're in sex, gender, and the body, we read an article called Deconstructing Download Discourse that was all about addressing.
Yeah, and it's a major issue, and I mean that's the part of the issue with HIV in the community right now.
I also think it's very indicative of the leadership of some of the bigger LGBT organizations that are fighting for equality, or I mean whatever. So I think that it's a big issue across the board, and until you see someone almost champion it and basically just redesign their organization, I think it's one that will unfortunately, very, very unfortunately, stay an issue, which is sad.
So not to totally whatever. Okay, we're inviting an ETSU alum who does a bunch of social justice work, who works at the intersection of racial justice, economic justice, and justice for sexual and gender minorities, named Ashley Woodard Henderson, is part of the Queer Enough Collective. Ashley Woodard Henderson. I'm pretty sure she's Chattanooga based now.
I was about to say I know her.
Yeah.
She's done a lot of work across the campus.
Yeah, so she's going to come back and do a talk as part of the Queer Enough Bunch of Speakers series, sort of specifically on here. So that's coming up. That's great.
I had a numbers question.
Yeah.
So you're talking about as we're able to increase these measures, then we predict that we can increase enrollment, retention, and then graduation.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any numbers? Is there research that gives us any numbers on the type of population we're talking about, the numbers of population we're talking about in Tennessee or in the United States or in the South?
That's one of the most widely debated statistics, I think, and a lot of it depends on how people ask the question and how people gather their sample.
Well, we don't. I mean, we have race, and if we look at our ETSU fact book, we have race, sex, gender, socioeconomic, but we don't have.
I know.
That's it.
U.S. estimates of how many sexual minorities there are in the U.S. range anywhere from 1% to 10%. Generally, it's about 3 to 5 that people agree on, but it also differs across gender. They found that more women identify as sexual minorities, so that's closer to 8%. So it might be a little different based on where we are, because people are probably more likely to not come to a university in the South if they really strongly identify in a certain way and know that and have the ability to go somewhere else. They might be more likely to do that, so it might be a little bit lower, but I would guess that the estimate is probably about the same.
So
5 to 8%
of the population,
mm-hmm.
U.S. population.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the percentage of the U.S. population that attends college? What I'm wondering is is this a silly argument? I mean, you can tell I'm not a numbers person with this question, but what I'm wondering is, can we report, or can we talk about numbers? Can we talk about the number of potential students that we are missing because we don't have these measures in place, because we don't take care to create a warmer climate on our campus? Is there any research that would help me kind of quantify that, or do you recommend that I don't because there's some problem that I'm not seeing?
No, I think that's a really interesting thing to think about, and not that I can think of off the top of my head is there exact research on it. I think it would be piecing together different statistics from different kind of population research estimates.
Because our admissions webpage shows that it costs around $16,000 to come to this university and live on campus as an undergraduate. Mm-hmm. And in other universities it costs around $25,000. So students here are making a real savings. So can I then say this is how many admission dollars we're losing per year because we're not putting in place these very important measures on our university. And this is the quantified number.
Another argument might be that the climate at the university is significantly higher than the community at large. And so LGBTQI students might be more comfortable attending here than they would be at any other of the community-based institutions. So you would have to balance that argument with something that's characteristic in the climate, general climate, that is still present at the university, if that makes any sense. Because the climate is 65 here. That's slightly cool, slightly warm, but it's cold in the community. So it's not an advantage for a college-age student to stay in the community as opposed to coming to the campus.
Yeah, I agree, and I hear what you're saying, where do they come here or do they go to UT, for example, because it's even more accepting.
So what are the variables in the environment?
Well, it was just an example.
So they go to Warren Wilson, or they go to UNCA, which is we're talking an hour away, so we're losing students across state lines.
But what do we have different? What do they have that we don't have?
The fact that they don't have to fear about being out there. I mean, I think part of the problem is that when you ask demographic questions on things such as admission surveys or whatever, sometimes students aren't the ones filling those out. A lot of times it's the parents that are filling those out. So you run into that issue, but then you also run into the fact that some people don't know, right? I mean, most of your identity exploration happens when you're in college and on campus, and so what you might put on your admissions survey your gender might be different from when you apply here to when you graduate. You know, your sexual orientation might change 7 times. You know, the more you kind of discover identity and the more you discover what you like, what you don't like, and things like that. So I think the fluidity of these things is what makes it tricky to actually obtain a firm number.
You have to be able to prove causation too. And if Asheville has something that we don't have, their climate is significantly warmer, can we say that that difference is because of that issue?
What if I take Asheville out of it? Just talking about ETSU.
I mean, one thing, this is not going to get us any closer to Harvard.
Comparative was what I thought you were going for in terms of opportunity cost.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
But some of the things that there is data on the frequency of queer geographic migration. And there's also, Southerners on New Ground has done a significant amount of research on the phenomenon of folks in small town and rural areas, small towns, small cities, and rural areas in the South leaving, both for the purposes of higher education as well as just for the purposes of getting out because the climate is changing. So I think that this argument about a sort of campus versus community cuts both ways insofar as the community climate has a direct effect on whether or not the campus is solid, right? So a lot of folks either don't consider staying in the area for college, or if they start, they might leave because of the shitty climate in the community. So I think that there might be some statistics you can find on queer migration specifically out of smaller cities and rural areas in the South that could help at least bolster that argument. We're still not getting exact numbers, right?
Well, we will know, so once we've completed this, we won't know, for example, how many people never came to ETSU who might have, but we will know numbers on people who are not planning on staying. And we can line that up with their gender and sexual orientation. Because we're asking them, how likely are you to stay at ETSU to finish your degree? And we also are asking a similar question for faculty and staff. So how likely are you to continue working at ETSU? So if we obviously want to retain students, but we also want to retain faculty and staff. So we'll have that information as well.
And I think that's why we're hoping with that survey to reach so many people, all faculty and staff and students, to take that survey, because the 65 that you mentioned is just based on like 1,200 students.
Just sexual minorities.
We have what,
65?
16,000 faculty and staff, so it's not necessarily the number.
And
that's the number that we know right now.
That's only an estimate for lesbian, gay, and bisexual people, and that's combined across groups. It was like one question, whereas the new study asked about each separate identity, includes gender, includes race, includes religion. So it's going to be much more specific numbers broken down by different identities.
So I agree. I don't know that we have a way of knowing the exact number, but
after the study, I mean, those questions about retention are so valuable.
Well, maybe after you get all these numbers, one of the things that were brought up was meaning making, like active and social change. As I told one friend who was dealing with something, I said, if we keep leaving, when will it get better? So maybe that should be the next movement. When will it get better if we keep leaving? I mean, that's just the ideal period. When you think of diversity, and diversity keeps leaving, and you keep getting it, it keeps leaving. I mean, it's just a vicious cycle. So when are we going to stand up and say, we're here, and we're going to stay here, and we're going to be here, and we're going to pave the way for others?
I like the way you think. That's something I struggle with just about every day.
Yeah, and when I think about leaving, I always think, well, who else, right? Like, who else is going to come here and do this? I'm here. I'm just have to pack up all my stuff. That's kind of like, that stuff out of here. Like, what in the world?
Well, I'm watching our time and it's 1 o'clock, and I know several of you may have 1 o'clock obligations. I want to thank Sherry and Emma for being here.